Cosmology brings us face to face with the deepest mysteries, with questions that were once treated only in religion and myth.
The Converted Man here. Today I'm going to be looking at a video from NorCaltheologian and counting up the number of logical fallacies made and seeing if he makes any or if he makes valid points and responding to them as appropriate. And we'll see what the conclusion is at the end of the video, whether we can conclude what he wants us to or whether or not we have to be skeptical about his conclusions because of the number of logical fallacies. Let's find out.
Okay, I'd like to talk today about atheism as a worldview.
But it's not a worldview, so this is a straw man.
Now, from the Christian perspective, and with Christian assumptions, atheism is a worldview. It makes assertions and it has implications.
Now, this could, if he expanded on it, make a good potential logical argumentation. If he could give us examples, citations, reasons to think that what he's saying is true, that from within this perspective, we view it in this way. Here's multiple instances where people have done this, both non-scholars and scholars alike. Here's quotes, here's references, here's even biblical passages that suggest this. All of those things could be used as evidence towards the conclusion that he's making. But he doesn't make that argument. He just states that this is the way it is and expects us to accept that that's the way it is. That yes, Christians all think that this is how it is, or this is the Christian view. It might be, it might not be, but there's no argument for it. So we have to be skeptical about it because there's no argument given.
But from within the atheistic worldview itself, actually, it's not a worldview.
Here we have the logical fallacy does not follow. The conclusion can't be, well, here's this worldview that's now not a worldview. That doesn't make any sense, it's incoherent, and thus doesn't follow.
If atheism holds, and I'm defining atheism here, atheist, as someone who does not think there's any metaphysical realm out there.
This is the logical fallacy of incoherency. It just doesn't make any sense. You can't just take a word and decide that you're going to define it in such and such a way. Essentially, that lands into two logical fallacies. A formal fallacy, because you're going against natural language and you're saying, oh no, the definition isn't what we all thought it was, it's actually this, and thus you're making a formal fallacy, and an informal fallacy of just being incoherent. So this is actually two fallacies in one.
And I can include in here the agnostic atheist, which I find interesting.
Irrelevancy and red herring. I'm not personally sure why he would find these things interesting. But the fact that he says, oh, I find it interesting, can indicate that there's some sort of lack of understanding going on. Because if you study these words and the meanings and the philosophy of them, there isn't any surprise there. It makes sense. There's agnostic theists, there's agnostic atheists. What's the big surprise here? What's the challenge to understanding this? I'm not sure, but because this is irrelevant to his topic at hand, and because I had to spend all this time explaining that point, it's also a red herring.
Someone who doesn't know if there is a metaphysical realm out there, you don't know, this could apply to them just as well.
So it's important to keep in mind that we're now using his definition of this word, which is totally and completely a straw man definition. As such, I have to add straw man as the logical fallacy.
An atheist is someone who does not think there's any metaphysical realm or doesn't know. So that means that atheists do not think there is any rational realism. That means there's no objective rational realm out there. There's nothing rational outside your own mind. So what this means is that the ideas in your mind about rationality are just subjective opinions. There's nothing to base all of them off of. So let me give you an example here. The solipsist doesn't think that the physical world exists outside of his mind.
So this is a change of topic, which is a formal fallacy and the continued straw man that he's been performing this entire time. He's going to continue to do that all throughout, but I have to count every single time he does it. The change of topic is we're not talking about atheists or atheism. We're now talking about this philosophy of solipsism or solipsis. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but that's now what we're talking about.
So you have an apple here, right? I have an apple. The solipsist, how silly would it be for me to argue with the solipsist if this apple, what color it is?
Irrelevancy. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Now, I would argue you could make a good, very strong case for the colors that are reflecting off of that apple, and there's multiple colors there. You could give scientific evidence for it. You could explain how the eye and the brain process colors. You could include counter examples, how people don't always process color because there are colorblind people out there. You could talk about other animals and how they process color, and you could really make a robust argument out of this example that could, if valid, show, perhaps, that the stance of solipsis is logically incoherent. But you don't make that argument, you just make this example. But we don't see that done here. There's no argument given that would indicate that solipsis is an invalid stance. What we see, rather, is just a very poor example.
The solipsist doesn't think the apple's really there. Why would I argue with him?
That's a very good question. My answer is penguins.
The solipsist doesn't think I'm there.
I know, right? It's stupid.
To argue that there's no objective apple outside the solipsist's mind, he thinks all that is outside his mind is simply an illusion.
Well, that might be true, but where is your argument?
All he knows is that he exists and that he's sensing things, so that the apple doesn't exist in reality. There's no objective reference point to test.
Again, I agree, but where's your argument?
The apple's existence or what color it is or anything. This goes the same for atheists.
Only true if the atheist in question happened to be a solipsist. Otherwise, you're making a straw man.
If there's no objective rational realm, then you have nothing to base any type of rational judgment off of. Nothing. There's no. This is simply an idea you have in your mind. It's an illusion to think that anything transcends. Any judgment transcends your own opinion.
Providing the definition of what a solipsis is not an argument.
Atheists make judgments about theism as irrational. They're making an assertion without any foundation.
If this conclusion had followed a logical string of argumentation, then it would be warranted. But it doesn't. Therefore, the logical fallacy does not follow, certainly applies to this statement.
If atheism holds, there is no objective rules of logic. Those are simply ideas that you have in your head. Those are opinions that have no basis in reality, objectively apart from me and you.
Even if I was to allow the substitution of sophism for atheism, and there's no reason to do that, his argument still does not follow, because he never produced an argument against sophism. So even if we granted his shifting of topic and his idea that all atheists are sophists, we still wouldn't be able to conclude this as the conclusion.
If that's the case, then all you're saying that theism is irrational is baseless.
If all of the premises had been logically valid up to this point, this could have been another conclusion that could have been warranted against the case for sophism. But nothing leads up to that, so we have to be skeptical that his conclusion is warranted.
Also, let's assume for a second, and theists do this because they want to talk with atheists, they assume that atheists understand rationality and basic rules of logic, because we accept that God has given everybody a part of his rationality, and so we go from there, and atheists like to jump in on that and then go from there and prove theism is wrong.
This is pre-assumptionalism as well as more straw man. I fall into the category of atheist because I'm a skeptic. As a skeptic, I doubt that there's a God. I could be wrong. I lack any reason to think that I am wrong at this time, but I'm open to being shown that I'm wrong about this idea and concept. I would love to have a conversation about rationalism and logic and how it works and functions. I can't do that here because there's too many logical fallacies that you've already produced. By those fallacies, you indicate to me that you, sir, don't understand logic.
But if atheism holds, then there's no part of us that's outside the system.
Appeal to consequence?
Everything we do, say, think, is determined. It's all determined.
Straw man. And I would also add that there are theists that believe that the universe is determined by God's will or providence, depending on who you ask. Calvinists certainly seem to fall into this category if we're talking about Christians, but there's plenty of other people that believe in different concepts of God that believe that everything is determined. So it's not just a potential atheist problem, it would also be a potential theist problem. But to say that all atheists or all theists believe in determinism is a straw man.
Therefore, our rationality is only based on the cause and effects of the universe.
Does not follow and is not an argument.
It shows that that undercuts atheist epistemology.
No, it would undercut deterministic epistemology if your argument was free of logical fallacies, which it's not.
Third, atheists accept naturalistic evolution from start to finish. There's no metaphysical realm involved in that. Now, if that's the case, that means that our reason is based in survival, not in getting truth.
Biological evolution is true. 95% of all scientists in the world think that it's true. Yes, as far as I'm aware, all atheists think that it's true, but there might be some atheists that doesn't. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter how many people we have that think that it's true, because that's not how we get to the truth. The data and the facts show us that biological evolution is true. And so there's no reason to think that it isn't true. Whether or not biological evolution has metaphysical things involved in it might be a separate debate that we might be able to have once you prove that you understand logic and reason and science, which you haven't done so far in this video. But let's just focus on the facts of the matter. There are theists that embrace and accept biological evolution, and to me, those theists are brilliant for doing so. There's no reason not to, other than dogma, which isn't a good reason, and other than that somebody said, oh no, biological evolution, that means we're monkeys, blah, you know, or whatever, which is nonsense, okay, because we're not monkeys, we're primates, but whatever. Biological evolution is true, period. There's no room for debate on that matter. Now, let me debate your stupid argument here. We've evolved for survival, and your argument is that if that's true, which is consequential argumentation, by the way, so it would be logically invalid, therefore, we've evolved to survive, not for the truth. Okay, let's just see where that goes. So, you and I are running from a bear, and I say, hey, there's a bear behind you, and suddenly, for whatever reason, you stopped believing that that was true. Oh no, you stop. No, there isn't really a bear and you get eaten by the bear as I continue to run. I survive because I believed in the reality of the bear chasing us. I get to pass on my genes. You don't. You're dead because you didn't believe in reality. So, adapting to survive means that we are going to survive best if we recognize reality the best. Those who do recognize reality better than those who do not will survive, and those who do not recognize reality as well as those who do will not survive, or will not survive as long, and thus have less chances to produce their offspring. So, being evolved as we are shows that yes, we can and do recognize reality. And we do so because we have adapted to survive by recognizing reality. And also the argument that he produced had the logical fallacy in it of consequential argumentation.
So if, and this could go for the moral realm as well, we could go right there, because atheists don't think there's any type of objective moral realm out there. They think that all these ideas of morality are simply in our head. These are just opinions. There's no morality. There's nothing objective outside of our minds about morality.
So here we have a straw man as well as equivocation. The straw man is that not all atheists do not believe in objective morality. Or a better way to say it is, not all atheists believe that morality is subjective. Many do, but not all. I'm a skeptic. That means by default I'm an atheist. I think that morality is a combination of objective and subjective things. The equivocation comes when we say the word objective. This particular YouTuber, NorCaltheologian, believes that by objective you have to mean something that exists in reality. No, not at all. 1 + 1 = 2. That's objective. It's true because the very nature of it requires it to be true. I could say, as an example, knife plus bad intention plus heart equals bad consequence. And I'm describing a action that somebody is performing with a knife. Their bad intention is stabbing it into somebody's heart, and that's a bad consequence because it's going to either injure severely that person or even kill that person. And that's something that I want people to try to avoid. So that description of this event is objective in that sense that mathematics is objective. And so I don't mean that it has to exist in this realm of reality as an object, like my computer exists objectively. There's a different term when I say objective regarding my computer, and when I say objective regarding 1 + 1 = 2. So that's where the equivocation comes, is in that word objective.
The type of atheism holds our rational and moral judgments are baseless, determined nonsense, only geared for survival. Basically white noise. That's all our thinking would be.
This is the appeal to consequence. This idea is so horrible, so dismal, that I don't like it, I want to avoid it, it's horrible, therefore it can't possibly be true. No, it could be true. For all I know, it is true. Maybe it is. I don't know. No idea. The argument for or against this idea has not been made, and simply saying, well, it's really, really bad, doesn't make an argument. It's nothing more than an appeal to consequence. It's similar to what you did before. Oh, if we're evolved, then oh no. Well, we are evolved, so that fails on that point. But here again, we have an appeal to consequence where you're just simply trying to avoid the conclusion that you don't like, not by making a logically valid argument, but by just saying it's really, really bad.
So when atheists tear down theists, what they do, they talk about Christianity and they say how stupid it is and look at this or that. They tear that down, and what do? They exchange it for oblivion. There's nothing. They're standing on nothing.
NorCaltheologian, this is an appeal to consequence again. You're attacking what you think the conclusion of the atheist is. You're not attacking the argument. You're saying, look at how ridiculous, how insane, how crazy their conclusion is. Therefore, it's invalid. Let's just go on with our lives, if you will. Now, you object to when an atheist mocks or makes fun of a Christian, says, look at how ridiculous you guys are. You believe in people coming back from the dead and ascending into heaven and healing and all this, and all that's ridiculous. I agree that that statement is not an argument. Simply saying X, Y, and Z are ridiculous, whatever X, Y, and Z might be, is not itself an argument. It's not logically formatted, so it can't be part of an argument. It's closer to what you would find in an erastic dialogue than a persuasionary dialogue. And yes, I've seen atheists who have done that. They're not making any points, and it would be a good point to make to say, okay, here's this video I found from this atheist who has just made fun of Christianity the entire video. And I'm just going to count how many times they've done that and point out that it's not an argument. And that would be deconstructive of that particular video, and it would give you positive ammo to later construct your own argument to show, here's my side, and look, I've debunked this side. I've shown that this person was using illogic. And if you could continue to do that, if you could show over and over again every argument that you've encountered has been logically flawed, and you were honest in doing it, it wasn't selective cherry picking, that people directed you to arguments or whether they're written or video and you responded to them, or you could, there's all this stuff that you could do that could show, hey, every time I've looked at an atheist argument, it's been logically flawed. And that's saying something. That's a big problem there for their conclusion. We have to be skeptical now about their conclusion because I've attacked the arguments. Similarly, it's not an argument to just make fun of Christianity. To just say, oh, it's ridiculous, it's nonsense, I'm done. That's not an argument either. So, your complaint works both ways. I just want you to understand that. It's a legitimate complaint to make. And if you want to make videos against people that do that, please do that. That's fine. But you have to learn the rules and structure of logic in order to do it in a way that presents the best argument that you can make. If you don't do that, then I can't go to your conclusion. Even if I thought your conclusion was nonsense, it doesn't matter. If you have premises that are logically valid and they flow into that conclusion, whatever I feel or think about that conclusion is completely irrelevant. That's how logic functions.
It's complete baseless assertions is what they're standing on. So what they're basically saying is that they're like someone who's saying that, oh look, the Earth, it's a bad place to live. It's stupid to live there because there's tsunamis, there's earthquakes, and there's volcanoes, and most of the Earth is water and deserts. There's all these deserts and all these dangerous places and evil animals that could kill us. So let's go live in outer space where there's no epistemological error and there's no moral gravity. There's nothing. So it's exchanging. They're tearing down theism for oblivion. There's nothing there. So actually, atheism, if it holds within its own assumptions, any assertion, moral or rational, becomes a white noise. It just implodes on itself. It can't sustain itself. Because there's nothing, no rational objectivity out there, there's no objective morality out there, there's nothing. So just like with the apple, with me arguing with this lawsuit about the apple, it's silly. Why are you arguing? Let's establish first that there's some type of objective apple out there to say if you're right about it or wrong. Okay? So the question is not if our opinions are subjective, they are, but are they right or wrong, and do they correspond to reality? That's the question.
That is a wonderful question, NorCaltheologian, and that should have really been your video right there. Say, I don't know a thing about logic, but I want to discuss this question. What do you think? What do you feel? What's your stance on it? What's your opinion on it? What data do you have about it? What facts are there? What can we discuss? Etc., etc. Leave the illogic out, okay? Get rid of this stuff. It's really destroying your conclusions here. It's clouding, muddying the waters of what could otherwise be a very intriguing conversation to have. And your conclusion is one that I must be skeptical of because you don't have any logical argument for it. Unless or until NorCaltheologian produces an argument that is not logically incoherent, we must remain skeptical about his conclusions and his ideas.